The categories of human rights are civil and political rights, and these are first generation rights. These are the rights that protect our freedoms and different things like that. Basically, include the Bill of Rights. An example of this is the right to a fair trial, freedom of speech, freedom of press, etc. Social and economic rights are second generation rights. These rights secure our well being and to meet the basic human needs. Example of this is Medicare and education. The collective rights are third generation rights that focus on security and peace. An example of this is protection from of war. My definition of discrimination is a way of thinking and acting in a way that separates people and denies their input to society. My definition of oppression is the continuation of a cruel and unjust treatment. Societal changes that are required to meet the social justice mandate is an individual has to be committed to the oppressed and vulnerable. There also needs to be equality of social resources. For societal changes, the policies need to be equal for all. All of the policies need to be made equal for everyone who is around the policies. Different social movements that have confronted the isms are the women's rights movement that's related to sexism. This has been an ongoing thing for a while. They have the movements going to get the right to vote, to do different things like that. Women are still continuing to get more rights as we go. As women are put somewhat equal or more equal than they were before, women are still paid less than men and everything like that, but it did challenge the sexism. The civil rights movement also challenged racism. This is still an ongoing thing today. Civil rights movement was big with Dr. Martin Luther King and all these different things that, made sure that African Americans and others, had their rights that they needed. The gay rights movement confronted the LGBT, even though the gay rights movement wasn't in the book wasn't recent in the way that the LGBT could marry in every state, and I think they're getting more rights, but there's still different prejudice acts that go against them. One of the isms that I see recently and goes to me is racism. We see it every day on social media, especially being my age. I see it everywhere, just the little things that go here and there that I look at more social media than other people might. The Ferguson shooting is a big one that pointed out to me. It got the whole nation involved. There was tons of threatenings. I would be talked about at family dinner. I don't think that racism or anything like that should be talked about at family dinner. Not that I down my family for discussing that or anything, because it is social and things need to be discussed like that to learn. But there were tons of threatenings. The police force was involved. Then there comes trust with the police force, and this causes a huge thing. And it's just real unfortunate. Dynamic effects and consequences of racism are there's 3 different levels, or individually, organizationally, and structurally. People are given a low status. There are many social injustices, and even with the civil rights, people are still treated indifferently and looked down upon just because of their color. Sexism, parents have a huge influence on how their children see male or females. Discrimination towards women can cause effects of behavior, even with women's rights. Women they are just not treated as well as the men, and even though they've gone towards more different things and getting better things for them, there are still some setbacks. The LGBT, they are an oppressed social group that they're to the society. They are also considered deviant. Their actions and how they present themselves are deviant. Their support and social activism, but they do not have many rights. They face discrimination from many different people. Before they, weren't allowed to have certain insurances with people who were around them. They couldn't like buy a house and different things. Now and since 2016 ruling or the ruling that they could marry and everything was in the book. But I think people are still growing towards them, which is a good thing. But they are still facing all kinds of discrimination, even with the ruling example of Kim Davis. Ageism is a prejudiced attitude towards elderly adults. It's people may not invest their time into the elderly as much, but some consequences of this is the overwhelmingness of healthcare systems. Handicapism, we consider them to have no feelings, interest, or ideas. This leads to social isolation and social marginality.